to Leading for Life Stories, Season 3. I'm Bob Judson, I'm the host for this podcast, and I'm absolutely delighted to have you here joining me. Regardless of whether you're a seasoned listener who's been with me since the beginning, or whether you've just dropped in for the occasional episode, I really hope you enjoyed the mix of content that I provide, the personal stories, the thematic episodes, and the guests that I have on the show. And I hope you find it all interesting and at least some of it useful. And without further ado, let's go. Hi everyone. My guest this week is Jon Geldart. Jon has had an amazing career in professional services and particularly marketing within professional services. And since 2019, he's been the Director General of the Institute of Directors in the UK, as an organisation that does an awful lot of work to support more the medium enterprise type organisations alongside other organisations that do the same thing, working closely with government to champion the rights and activities of those organisations. It provides great facilities for its members. I am a member of the IOD and I think it's terrific. It does some really good stuff, lots of interesting activities. And Jon will talk more about that as well. And he's also got a fantastic sort of extracurricular set of activities that he does. And I won't spoil it. I'll let him talk about that and explain it for himself. But really, really interesting character. And I'm sure you're going to love the conversation just as much as I did. Off we go. Jon, welcome to the podcast. Thank you very, very much indeed for joining. Really great to have you on. And I'm looking forward to what I think will be a fascinating set of insights.
No, it's great to be here, and I feel humbled you asked me.
Oh, not at all. No, I mean, I think when I look at your career journey, it's been a really interesting one. I mean, you've spent most of your life in professional services. You've obviously done a lot of marketing work, in particular in that, looking at your LinkedIn profile anyway. But I mean, just to get us started, can you build on that and put some flesh on those bones and tell us a bit about your career journey so far?
Yeah, it's a bit like climbing a mountain. When you're at the top, you look back down, and I'm not at the top, so I'm about halfway up, I think, hopefully. A bit of time to go yet. You look back down. When you're going up, you have no idea where you're going, apart from there's the top of a mountain somewhere. You look back down and go, oh, right, that's how I got here. And that's kind of how my career has careered over the last 10, 20, 30 years, I suppose. But you are right. I kind of died in the wool marketeer. I came out of FMCG, I suppose, way back when it was kind of fashionable, when drinks industry was in the fast-moving consumer goods. I was at university. I went from university, and I had two choices. I was offered a great job to join what was then the British Rail Catering Organisation, or to go and learn to be a brewer. Well, that took me about 8 nanoseconds to work out that I really thought that, clearly I went for the rail, that I was just far better cut out to be a brewer than I was going to be serving sandwiches, curled up as they may be on British Rail. So I went off to be a commercial trainee for an organisation that still exists, but the actual brewery I worked in is now a car park in Alloa in the middle of Scotland. And I then sort of did lots of stuff. I worked amongst the different jobs I had, and this is kind of forming in my career. I worked as a salesman. I worked in accounts. I worked on the drays delivering beer, and I worked in the brewery. So I was actually partially trained as a brewer, which was also kind of fascinating. It was all in Scotland, so that was an Englishman. Although I have to say, I must just go right to the cut to the chase here. I'm not English. I'm from Yorkshire, and there is a difference. So I remember being in a bar in Easter House in Glasgow, which I was running, attempting to run, I have to say, along with another manager. And a delightful Glaswegian suggested that I wasn't from around there. And I said, yes, of course, my good man, I'm not from around here, but I actually am from Yorkshire. He went, oh, that's all right then, pal. That's just a Scotsman with his head kicked in. So after that, it was fine. And I learned a lot about cultural dissonance, but also maybe how to use humour to overcome it. And that kind of went on from there. I ended up moving around and eventually landed in brands and the marketing function. and in a very short compressed story, ended up managing some of the larger brands for Allied breweries. For those of us who are a little bit older, you might remember Castlemaine Forex, and I wouldn't give a Forex for Castlemaine Forex. Brands like Skol Lager, that are long since defunct. I was involved in Tetley Bitter, so I was a poor sod that took Tetley Bitter to the south of England, which was the right thing to do, clearly, but getting them to drink it was the problem. Went off from there to John Smith's, and so I was very blessed to be able to work with some of the biggest advertising agencies in the world, and to cut my teeth on some amazing brands, and to have a few failures, which of course you can just move on from if you call it a test market as opposed to a failure. And that was also kind of seminal in developing my experience. And I kind of went from there. I was moved on from there to run an agency very briefly in Leeds. I moved from there to, by a really quirky set of circumstances, to go and be the first marketing manager for what was then Coopers & Lybrand, which was the formative part of what has now become PwC, PricewaterhouseCoopers, after the merger of Deloitte Haskins and Sells and Coopers & Lybrand and Pricewaterhouse. So the kind of the behemoths of the accounting profession of the day. And I ended up in marketing. I think I hold probably one of the first marketing people ever to be recruited into professional services. At the time, it was all changing. And then sort of never looked back, looked round a lot because it was pretty scary. But I kept going in that for quite a long time. Had the honour of being able to grow my career in what became PwC eventually, and I was involved in some of those rebrands. And of course, now they've rebranded and they've rebranded and they've rebranded, and that's history. And the accounting profession is very different now to that which it was when I was around in it. But went from there really into a very odd jump, really. I say from PwC, ended up working in London, working with the board, and the rest is kind of odd, I think, because I left PwC to go and walk to the North Pole, more of which maybe later, and
Definitely.
off ice, and walked into the Ottawa office of Grant Thornton with a beard, and a very large beard by that time, been on ice for the best part of nearly 2 months, and into a brand new job as the global marketing director for Grant Thornton. Rebranded Grant Thornton globally, 147 countries, and many different languages, many different cultures, and that taught me an awful lot about cultural dissonance, which I, of course, learned in those formative days back in Easterhouse, in that pub with my friendly Scots neighbour, and that really was the kind of the story then that took me over into China. I spent nearly 10 years off and on in China, because I worked with different organizations, part of the Grant Thornton family around the world, to bring them together to rebrand them, firstly globally, and then actually ended up rebranding the Chinese firm, because we brought 5 firms together in China. And I think I held the rather dubious honor of being one of the only Laois, or foreigners, to rebrand a Chinese accounting firm without really knowing anything about Chinese, although I was a fast learner because I was embedded in the business. And then from there, again, I did a few interesting things. Again, more of that later, until it became clear that I really needed to leave. Main reason for that is that, and this maybe you want to have a chat about, I was 20 years in a rally team. So I was a navigator in a rally team for 20 years. And in those early years, I actually managed to break my neck. And eventually that came back to haunt me. And I regrettably had to have spinal surgery. So left Grant Thornton in order to have spinal surgery, and thought, I'm not going to do this anymore. And set up a consultancy. And then some poor individual decided it'd be a really good idea to ask me if I was interested in joining the IOD. And that's where I am.
Yeah, wow. What I mean, that's an amazing set of additions that I didn't appreciate, actually. And I think the advertising thing is fascinating, isn't it? Because it is, I've forgotten who said it now, but the old cliche about 50% of the money I spend on advertising is wasted. I just don't know which 50%. And that's so true if you look at all sorts of things. And I just the other day I was reading Ranulph Fiennes' latest book, and he was talking about a guy he met at some point who had worked for Gillette and was sent out to be bringing Gillette razors out into the Middle East, which of course was a equally fool's enterprise when nearly everybody out there is wearing beards, and obviously it's not an ideal market for razors. And I can imagine Tetley to the south of England would be one of those.
The same sort of challenge. I mean, Rand's got lots of stories. I came into contact with Rand quite a lot in the training to pole and the subsequent work I did. I did a lot of work after that. So I'm a qualified UK mountain guide as well. So I do take people out into the wilds of the UK and make them cold, wet, miserable, and then bring them back. Hopefully they learn something about leadership and development in that experience. But that's something else I've done. So I've carried on my exploration. I've been in Himalayas and all over the world and climbed everywhere and done stuff. So.
Well, yeah, and let's digress straight down that rabbit hole to start with. I mean, why the North Pole? What what took you to do to that?
Well, I was bored. Basically, I was on the, and I remember this particular day, morning. I was on the inevitable tube journey into work one morning, and I don't know if you remember it. I think they still have Metro now as the magazine or the paper you can get in the morning, and no, you can have. I just don't read it anymore. And I picked this thing up off the seat and thumbed through it, and on the second page, on the inside, there was an ad. Well, not an ad, an article. And it was the same article or alleged article or advert that Shackleton put in the Times in 1918, when he wanted people to go to the South Pole. And this said the very similar thing. So it said men, of course, and women, now being PC, wanted for hazardous journey, safe return likely. The actual thing said safe return doubtful. And basically I applied, along with, as it turned out, to be an awful lot of people. Long story cut short, I got selected, and I was one of. I actually became the primary navigator, second medic on a unsupported pull, so man hauling expedition to the North Pole. Actually, we went to geomagnetic North Pole. I'm sure you are aware there are actually 4 North Poles. More of that if you want. But actually did that, so I went out early. I spent 2 years training. So I say I'm in addition to being a qualified UK mountain guide, under that system, I'm also a qualified holistic masseur. So I needed to make sure that I was able to keep people healthy. So I did my anatomy and physiology exams. I did those, and I continue to be qualified as a mountain medic. So I have to be re-qualified every 3 years. So I continue to do that. So that's what took me out there, and that's 26 days on ice eventually. So interesting stories: ice breaking, polar bears, all sorts of stuff. Getting hunted by a polar bear is a different experience, I can assure you. It gets more scary the closer they get, because you realise that at some point they are the top of the food chain, and you are next down in the line of the food chain, and they really would like to eat you. So that does focus the mind enormously when you're dealing with them. But I can wax lyrical on that. But I think the thing that really did was it proved that I could do things that nobody else could do. Now, that's sort of, when you work in professional services, particularly if you work in marketing, everybody else can do your job, right? If you're only there because they haven't got the time to do it. And that really is one of the things that a lot of marketeers and professional services used to find. It's no longer the case now, but it used to find very dispiriting. And one of the things that drove me, and I'm a fairly resilient individual, was to demonstrate to the practice that I may be an overhead, but I was adding a lot of value. And that value comes in different ways: business creation, business development, brand creation, brand valuation, and many other aspects of delivering, if you like, the services that organizations have to the client base, and to make sure you continue to deliver that value. So I was just fed up with people telling me they could do my job. Right, all right, smart ass, you can walk to the North Pole. Maybe I won't do that. Okay, now you want to listen to me.
Yeah, it's a great point. And I guess as well, doing something like that, you will have learned a good deal about yourself along the way. I mean, that's a pretty challenging expedition.
Yeah, and that's inevitable. It's, I think one of the things that I kind of very alive to is that For me, that was extraordinary. An extraordinary thing to do. Probably the hardest, well, definitely the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. But for some people, getting up in the morning is the hardest thing they've ever done. Particularly, we see recently an announcement. A very famous rugby player has just come out and talked about his recent diagnosis and motor neuro. That's a debilitating disease that is going to make it very difficult to do things. And a friend who's got MS and quite an absolute sort of miracle of a woman who is inspiring, really, by the way that she's dealing with the disease. So for me, my extraordinary is not somebody else's extraordinary, and it's one of the things I learned really about myself is that I really do like trying to solve intractable problems, and I like overcoming significant challenges. And I do set myself, and I have done since I was, this is quite a long time ago, because I'm right old now, as they say in Yorkshire. I set myself the challenge of doing something extraordinary every year from the year I became 40. So I started running marathons at 40, and doing marathons became a bit boring, so I did mountain marathons. I ran Snowdon Marathon twice. And then I thought, there must be something else I can do. So I say I've been a rally navigator during that period as well for best part of 20 years. And I learned a lot about how to do things properly rather than just quick. Slow is quick in rallying. You just go quick and you just go quick and just go quick. You will come off. So it is about literally balancing the car, but also treating it as a proper job. And without being professional, without being paid for it, that's essentially what we do. We treat it as a job. And from the moment we treated it as a job, we started getting quicker. And we got quicker. We started rather worryingly be up to the top of the field. And you used to think, well, how on earth do they get those extra seconds? And it's because they treat it like a job. And that was one of the things I learned really in my experience of doing all that I've done, is take it seriously. If you want to do something, take it seriously, learn the skills, and make sure you can then apply them. And failure is okay. Failure is just learning. Failure is just experience. And then you can go back and go around. And I can think of several occasions, particularly in the Himalayas, where walking, stroke climbing, the sensible route is often not the most sensible route. And you've got to have the kind of wherewithal and self-awareness to know that if you go that way, you are likely to die. So it's far better to backtrack, even though it might be a whole day of backtracking, and go around some other way, because the mountain will be there tomorrow. You may not be. So really the thing I learned in all the training, in particular around on ice and climbing and the like, is that nature's a beast. And you can set yourself targets, but you've really got to be trained. You've got to apply that training, and then you've got to know when not to do something. And often that's probably the most salutary lesson that I ever did learn is about when not to do something is just as important as when doing it.
So many good points. I completely agree with you, and I think the amount you get from taking yourself out of your comfort zone and doing those things that stretch you, and learning, self-awareness in the sense of when to give up and when not to press ahead, and when to sort of live to fight another day and go back and do it a different way. And also being aware of what the rest of the team are capable of. If you're in a team enterprise, looking at, it's not just about you, it's about what they're up to and how they're feeling and how they're performing and whether they're up for completing it, and motivating them to continue in the right kind of way. I think that all that sort of stuff from the things you describe, is clearly key. And I mean, interestingly, in your rally example, I mean, the whole issue around marginal gains, being able to turn around and look at what are the small things that can make a difference, that are actually going to turn around and improve me here. I mean, there's some great examples, aren't there? Matthew Syed's written about it with British cycling and and building up Team Sky and things like that, where it was all tiny little things that cumulatively together made a huge difference to get them to the right space. So no, I totally get that. That's fantastic. Yeah, we might come back to the polar bears and stuff in a bit, because I think that's also really interesting. I mean, just stick with the leadership theme for a second though, since we've moved into that. I mean, I'm podcast obviously about leadership, and you've spent a long time doing lots of different facets of business and all that external stuff. I'm just really interested in your own journey to some extent, in terms of how you've developed yourself as a leader, what's changed, what's been unconscious, what's been conscious about that change, and how you kind of have shaped yourself and what's important to you in leadership roles?
I think one of the kind of core things is my best friend is the guy who I did rallying with for an awful long time. And we have this kind of mantra between us. Firstly, taking it seriously. And the second thing is we're not in life to be a spectator. So really operating on the edge sounds risky, but actually if you're used to operating on the edge, you can operate on the edge quite happily. But that's about training and repetitive training and building confidence and climbing the ladder of confidence, one step at a time. There are very few shortcuts to stuff. In this day of kind of immediacy and habit now, I do feel that often, particularly when working with teams, is that people kind of just want to get whatever it is. They just want to get, are we going to get a bonus? Well, if you work, yeah, we're probably got a fighting chance. But if you do no work and you just want it delivered on a plate, well, probably the answer is no. So my kind of journey, am I a leader? I don't know. But I mean, my journey in trying to encourage and work with people is one thing which is the most clear, which is know where you're going. And being clear to everybody where you're going. It gives immense confidence. Okay, so North Pole, right? We know where we're going. How are we going to get there? Well, we're going to work that out. What are the goals for next year's budget? Okay, these are the three things, and I try to work it down to what is the overarching thing. If I talk about the IOD for a moment, one of the things I did when I came here was to kind of refocus the business on what actually is its purpose. What are we here to do? And purpose-led organizations, and there's evidence to this actually now, particularly in the US, people have looked at purpose-led businesses, and they are actually more profitable than those businesses which are less led by purpose. So the purpose of the Institute of Directors is simply to improve the quality of directors and boards. That's it. And the notion is that by improving the quality of directors, better directors will run better businesses. Better businesses will be better for the economy, and better economies are broadly, internationally, better for the world. So it is a really important focus that we have, which is we're here to improve the quality of directors. And I include myself in the set. And to do that, you have to do kind of basically three things. We need to connect people because as this is an example, by talking and working together, you usually get to a better answer. And that's also about avoiding groupthink in boards. So we actually teach this, developing our skills, and we're an awarding body. So we are the only people in the world that can award a chartered status to a director through our accredited learning experience. We have exams, we have courses, and we do CPD. So we connect people one to another, shoulder to cry on at worst, and it's a place to learn at best. We develop their skills, and also we influence the people that matter. So, but that's all focused, and I'll come back to that in a second, that's all focused around improving the quality of directors and their equivalents. So police, heads of nursing staff, people who have fiduciary duty, who's if they get it wrong, either somebody's going to die or you're going to lose a lot of money. So that's kind of where if you're bracketed in that space. But that purpose is often what businesses aren't clear about. I mean, I've been around the world, and around businesses, and going back and saying, why are you here? What do you exist to do? And that's a question I ask of individuals as well. So, what are you here to do? And it's surprising how often, CEOs I talk to throughout my career have gone, well, what do you mean? Well, what are you here to do? What's your purpose? Oh, well, it's to deliver shareholder value. No. What's your purpose? Why do people get up in the morning and come and work for you? In order that, okay, they're going to make money, but that's often secondary once people are kind of moving on through a job. People join brands, I would contend, and they leave people. I think several people have said this. I think Branson probably most famous. But that is, what does your brand stand for? And that's really a differentiator from the marketplace that is probably unassailable. People look in marketing, we're always in this kind of looking for nirvana, we're looking for the USP, the unique selling point. By and large, it's purpose-led. So if you go and talk to one of our nearly 100 staff and you ask, why is the Institute here? They will probably give you their own answer, but it'll be around, we're here to improve the quality of directors. Well, how do you do that? Well, it's, we're going to connect people, we're going to develop them, we're going to influence the people that matter, because we work very closely with the UK government and other governments. And that really is around being clear about what we are. Basically, we focus on corporate governance. We are probably one of the leading world authorities on governance, but we're also a community. We're a community of like-minded people, and we're a movement for change. So we are really advocating, particularly with government, for changes in at the moment, trying to balance the books, different issue. And we are evidence-led. So we go to government with evidence from our surveys and our data to provide them with the information that hopefully will be useful in making the right decisions to guide the country through to the next through the challenges that we have and into the next challenges. But what's your purpose?
Yeah, and again, great points. I mean, to pick up on purpose first, and then one other thing. I mean, I think it's individually, I mean, as well as corporately, I think it is such a critical feature of anybody's life. I mean, if you don't actually know what your kind of purpose in life is, it starts to become challenging as to why you're actually doing what you're doing. And I think one of the things, I mean, not least I've seen in people leaving the military over time, is some of the time they've spent their entire life, working life in an institution like the military, whether it's the Army, Navy, or Air Force, it doesn't make any difference. And then they leave, and suddenly it's, well, what's my reason for getting up in the morning? And of course, that can have dramatically bad impact on your health, apart from anything else. So it is really, really important to keep that in mind. And I think the other thing that, just sort of leading on from some of the stuff you've said there about people often conflate or confuse leadership and management for me. I mean, I think, there's so often this, they're mixed up in the way they think about it. And I'm at my kind of one word definition for each is I always talk about management for me is about process. It's about getting stuff done in terms of delivering whatever your expectations are, whether they're targets and reporting and all the rest of it. But leadership for me is all about inspiration. If you're leading anybody, in anything, then unless you're inspiring them to do it, they're not going to do it for long. They might do it for a bit out of curiosity, but they're not going to stick with it. And particularly if you're doing the sort of things you've been describing, where you're going into dangerous and/or difficult pursuits external to the workplace, that's definitely about inspiration. It's about taking people with you and convincing them that, to use your Himalayas example, this is the decision we should take. And and the leaders, the cream rise to the top in those kind of environments where it's making sure that you're not necessarily the one that shouts loudest, but you're the one that people have the most faith in because you've done the most inspiring, I think. And I think that's so there's some great stuff in everything you've just said there.
I think it's I agree absolutely that management is about process. We really need good processes. I mean, any organisation needs good processes, and but it is sort of what it says in the tin, this thing between management and directors. Managers do manage stuff, and it's really important to have well-managed businesses. But the notion of a director isn't to be directive, but it's to seek out the direction. Mm-hmm. And that's really about how boards are different, and being a director on a board is different to being an executive manager in the business, because when you're in the business, you're in the business, and your job is to make it in the business to work. But when you're a director and you're on a board, you're on the business. And there's that old phrase, people spend too much time in the business and not enough time on the business. And that on the business is to your point about leadership, I would contend. And of course, there are great managers who are great leaders, don't get me wrong.
Sure.
My sense is very much that if you don't know where you're going, it's really difficult for people to know where they're going. And if you're going in and leading isn't also, in my mind, being at the front. I think that sometimes you can lead from the middle. Sometimes it's appropriate to lead from the back. Sometimes it's appropriate to lead from the inverted commas the front. And that depends on what needs to be done. In some of the work I've done outdoors, I don't lead at all. I'm up on the top of the mountain while the team is operating in the valley. So you get better observation. You get a step back, and this is something I've learned both in the outdoors and definitely in business, is it's important to step back and look at the picture. So look at the totality, look at where the team's moving, for example, and you'll know this from military. Basically, you can see a team moving very differently if you're 50 yards away or 100 yards away and got elevation than you are if you're in the team, because you can't take the whole team dynamic into account. So that's part of what I try to do, and what I've tried to do is to always be a step back. And sometimes you're seen as being aloof and differentiated out there as a result. that might be a regrettable and intended consequence. But I do think it's really important to have a whole view. And then you can see if people are, broadly shifting in one direction that ultimately won't be as easy to get to the goal. You can help people correct, and usually self-correction rather than being corrected is a far better way forward. So being to nudge leadership and supporting people to make decisions and looking at options and then making the decision and owning the decision, which is another important component here, is really important, I think.
No, totally so. I mean, particularly your point about self-correction. I mean, I remember back in the flying world, it was always a thing where if you were developing someone's skills in a relatively new area of what you were doing, and you were flying, as I often did, as a supervisor in the back of an aeroplane with a new challenging thing you're asking someone to do, then the trick was always to let them take it as far as they could without it becoming dangerous, so they learned from it, as opposed to just turning around and taking control from them too early. And I think that translates directly to a business environment as well. If you are always saying, well, I'll correct it and I'll leave it, I'll redo it, or I'll provide a safety net essentially that is always going to pick you up, and adjust what you've done, which is, I mean, demoralizing, I think, to some people when they're sitting there and say, well, why did I bother spending time doing it if you're actually just going to change it? But it also means they get comfortable with the fact that actually I don't really need to focus too much on this because you're going to correct it anyway, which is just unhelpful. I mean, in developing the people that work for you, it's so important to empower them, to bring them on, to give them the right kind of opportunities to fail as well as to succeed, because that's how, again, point you made earlier on, that's how you get better. Failure is about feedback. It's about, right, okay, this is how we're continuing to improve, and embracing that, I think, is such an important thing. And interestingly, again, my old world, I mean, the aviation sector generally, civil and or military, I think is one of the exemplars in some ways for doing this quite well, because we do encourage honest feedback. We encourage people to share it when they've failed. We do it because we want to get better. We also do religiously used to debrief things. So would complete every single sortie you fly, you would debrief it. And that is such a good discipline, because of course you're always picking over the bones of what you've done and looking to turn around and develop the good stuff, and not repeat the bad stuff, and evolve from that. And again, I think it's one of the things, unfortunately, that in my experience of the business world, is all too often seen as an overhead, and actually it's not. It's a massive enabler if you do it well and you actually build in the time to do it. So it's just a shame people don't do it a bit more often.
I agree. I think it's kind of really important not to dwell on the failure, but to help it to be a springboard to the next thing. And my sense is that, being a marketeer, of course, I have an answer for this. Well, also being a Yorkshireman, of course, I have an answer for everything. But the thing there is, it's not failure; it's a trial. It's a test, and it's okay to fail, inverted commas. And I also think it's about the character of leaders and character of good managers. Is people are very forgiving if they believe you're authentic. And I think it was Groucho Marx said, sincerity, if you can fake that, you've got it made. But if you are authentic and sincere, and people can see that you are, then they will, for starters, they'll talk to you, which is incredibly enabling. And also they know that you're not going to fire them. Unless they, clearly there are circumstances where you do fire people, but broadly you're not going to fire them, because you're there to actually support and nurture, but you're not going to make it easy for them. You give them the job; they need to do the job, and building that authenticity of talk about responsibility isn't just given; it's also taken. So it's really important people take responsibility for what their actions and what they're going to do, and that they have a plan and that they're going to execute on that plan, and that if it doesn't quite work, well, they can correct or self-correct, and it's okay. It's okay to do that, because stuff happens, things change, circumstances change, and decisions are often made, hopefully, with the best information you have at the time. You can guarantee, as soon as you do that, the next day you'll get some more information. And it's about being agile in the way that you deal with incoming, as opposed to incoming in the military sense, but incoming in terms of data. And agility isn't the ability to hop from one foot to the other at great speed. It's the ability to correct and to learn and to adapt within, however, the framework that you have in the business, and actually within the framework you've set yourself for your objectives. So I do still expect us to be able to achieve the numbers. But what's come in is additional data that mean we can't make those numbers this way. Maybe we can make them this way, or maybe we could change the way we operate in order to make them just differently, and that's fine too. But at the end of the day, we're here to create value. We're here in a business to support all of our people and their immediate families, and the infrastructure that sits behind them. We have a responsibility, not only fiduciary responsibility, but also kind of emotional, moral responsibility to our people. So you don't let them down, and therefore you take responsibility. You make sure you're agile in the way you respond to things, which brings me to kind of another thing I'm passionate about, which is about communication. And often organizations and individuals say too much to be understood. There's a million things you can say, and there's a million things that businesses often do say, and it just becomes blah. So being really clear, this goes back to that kind of purpose and that focus that you have about the business and about yourself. If you're really clear about what you stand for and about what your business stands for, it becomes really easy not to talk about the rubbish, because you then just focus on that. And people go, oh, but what about this? But great idea. We're not doing that, because that actually isn't going to make any difference. Not going to make, to use another analogy, the boat go faster, which is the New Zealand winning sort of strategy. This is some time ago for the round the world yacht race. And it was all about, does it make the boat go faster? And that's the question I keep asking within the business. Does it make any difference? So what? And it's one, the hardest question. I know it's a question you're going to ask me later, but I'll answer it now. Why? Why? That's a really good question. So what? I mean, I was, another one of my sort of odd things about me, I was part trained in journalism, and that was a question. That's a great question. My late father talked about, those 5 men. Was it right and true? The who, what, why, where, and who. And those are the big questions. And why, which, if you've had children, is the worst question you never get asked. Why? Well, and it can't be because I say so, which is where you would normally end up as a parent, because that's not adequate. And certainly they remember that when they get older. They said, well, you were wrong. Oh, yeah, well, yeah, okay. But that why question, being able to answer that why question in a board, we just call it a business case, but it's still why.
No, it's great. Again, more great points. I think I often talk about protecting the team. If you're the leader in any shape or form, allowing them to get on with it, do the job, and actually providing an umbrella over the top of them that essentially insulates them from external critique when stuff doesn't go quite as planned. Now, that can either be a complete failure, or it can be actually just it wasn't quite the result you were expecting. And my kind of contract always with the people that were working for me was, look, I will do that, to the end of the earth, as long as you're not breaking the rules, you're doing it within the bounds of what you've been asked to do. And if stuff goes wrong, you tell me about it before someone else does. Because, that integrity piece is so, so important. And I think the other one that, you kind of highlighted in there is this whole business as a leader being good at dealing with ambiguity, because the world is ambiguous. I think far too often you see people who want certainty. They want to have all the information to be able to sift through before they make a decision. And in lots of walks of life, that is just not the case. It's either time critical, or you're not willing to make the 80% call when actually that's the right thing to do. If you're waiting for the 100% solution, very often you're never going to get to that, and you're not going to make a better decision anyway. So thinking about how you actually get to that point and have as much information as you can get, and sifting through that and being decisive at that point, I think is really, really crucial to get you to be into a successful place. And your why point, I mean, I totally agree. I mean, I think it's a hard thing to answer, but at the same time, you have to actually be able to to answer it. And I mean, interestingly, I think one of the commonest misconceptions I see when I talk to people about leadership, and particularly talk about through a lens of having been in the military for a long time, is people look at the military and assume that it's an authoritarian leadership structure. It's a pure hierarchy. You just turn around and shout at people, and they jump and get on with it. That could not be further from the truth. There are very, very few occasions when any of my friends and colleagues, even at senior level in the military, will have ordered people to do something. That I'm not saying it never happens, because it certainly does. I mean, it's not, we used to joke, I certainly used to joke all the time that, we're here to preserve democracy, not to practice it. And ultimately, you have the ability to turn around and be directive, but you very, very rarely use that tool, because if you do, it's a silver bullet, ultimately, and you haven't got that many of those. You need to be, doing it only very sparingly, and genuinely actually getting people to go with you on that journey. And that's just as true in every other walk of life. I think it's so important. Hey, changing tack a little bit. Back to you personally. I think one of the things I always talk about is role models. I mean, you've done some really interesting things, which I guess has probably shaped that a little bit. But who are the people that have really kind of inspired you, that you look to and have kind of influenced you as you've developed yourself personally?
Okay, well, they're all dead, in no particular order. So Shackleton,
Hmm.
the greatest failure of, in history, and yet success. So a little known book called Shackleton's Lost Men is worth reading, because not everybody did survive. And fantastic story with endurance and bringing all the men back alive. But there was the lost men on the other side of the Antarctica that were also involved. So Shackleton, beyond a shadow of a doubt, and the one driving thing for Shackleton, from my perspective, is the way he recruited. So Shackleton didn't recruit on skills; he recruited an attitude. And no secret. Anybody wants to know what am I interested in? Recruiting people, attitude. You can train skills; it's really difficult to train attitude.
Yeah, totally agree.
So that would be a primary kind of role model. Ran Fiennes. I mean, he's not dead, but it just comes to my mind as the Mad, Bad, and Dangerous. If you go and read Rand's books, you'll know what I mean. But the other one's kind of formative, I suppose. Really, I love the use of words. And my late father, I once said, words are scalpels, so use them sparingly. And although I'm doing all the talking on this, uh, the importance of using the right word can make an enormous difference. And that again is why spending time crafting the story, and I mean don't mean story a lie, I mean the story of what it is you're trying to convey, using the right words is incredibly important, and not using too many words. How do you get cut through? Usually through simplicity. And brings me to my other kind of hero, which is Churchill. It takes longer to write a short letter than it does just to ramble on with a long one. And that also about the refining and the quality of language and the importance of language. Of course, Churchill, he did a lot of things wrong, no doubt, but a man of his time. And the ability that he had to cut to the chase, obviously make very difficult decisions, but cut to the chase with the right words, I think is something that I admire. And I mentioned my late father as well. I think everybody is influenced by their parents, and certainly and it happens to be all male as it happens. Although Louise Aitken Walker remains up there pitching, one of the fastest women on wheels, and one of the world's greatest rally drivers, would also be one of my heroes, I suppose.
No, good list. I mean, I think it's interesting, isn't it? The oratory piece, because it is a challenge to be concise, to be effective with what you're trying to say, and actually you see it with Churchill's speeches. I mean, it's a classic, isn't it? When you look at the power of oratory, and how, again, inspiring that can be. When you look at some of his World War II stuff. I mean, the fact that it's still being played now, not just in the context either purely of historical documentaries and things like that. It actually features in all sorts of things. And I think that, is proof positive of just what a difference it can make. So I totally agree with that. I mean, Rand Fiennes, I do. He's an extreme individual in every sense, isn't he? That I mean, you mentioned obviously jumping into do lots of other extreme stuff. I interviewed a lady called Sally Orange the other day. She said, "Oh yeah, I've run 87 marathons." My jaw hit the floor. Well, I've done two, and I've done a whole bunch of half marathons and things. But she's right out there with this extreme stuff. And one of the things she's done is the World Marathon Challenge, which of course was also a Rand Fiennes thing. And I just find the the mental and physical strength and kind of desire to put yourself through the ringer. I mean, I'm hugely amused at Ram Fiennes. In order to cure my vertigo or attempt to cure my vertigo, I thought I'd climb the north face of the Eiger.
That's right. Yes.
Okay, most people would
That's
probably take a different approach to that, but I do think it is probably the relevant point in for anyone is to think about these areas that you are well and truly struggling to deal with, finding a way to get out of your comfort zone, get into your stretch zone, try not to get too much into the panic zone, to actually be in a position where you do conquer some of those is definitely important. I mean, you might not need to be that extreme in doing it, but finding a way to address it rather than just ignore it, I think, is definitely the right strategy.
Yeah. No, I recently um, decided to go and do what I've dubbed the 3+3, and I tried to find out if anybody ever done this before. So I will claim this world first, which is to climb, run the three national peaks of the UK, immediately followed by the three Yorkshire peaks. And I did that about 6 or 7 weeks ago. And I believe that nobody's done it, but I mean, now I'm going to be proved wrong because people will tell me they have, but I haven't seen it recorded anywhere. And that was really within a defined time frame. So we did it in totally, including driving, in 33 hours. We didn't break the speed limit. That is about pushing myself to the edge of my ability. But running down Ben Nevis in the twilight is an amazing experience. Coming off Scarfell at dawn is an amazing experience. Walking through the night and the three peaks of Yorkshire, which are just up the road, which I do an awful lot, not at night, but I go up there an awful lot, was an amazing experience. And to do that, with all of the elements trying to stop you, is a really great experience. And I think for me, I like pushing myself to the boundaries, not just in terms of physical capability. So I'm getting a bit long in the tooth now, so it's getting more difficult. But just doing something, I mentioned trying to do something extraordinary every year, and I've tried to do things that really test me, either intellectually, emotionally, or physically, and that really does builds your resilience. Which I think is really important in business. So I don't do it just to do it. I do it because I know I need to be resilient in doing turnarounds, which is kind of where I've ended up doing things in business, and being clear about what it is you're trying to do and planning it as much as you possibly can, but being agile to be able to deal with what life and sometimes the weather throws at you is really important.
No, totally. I mean, I can remember vividly. I used to do quite a lot of scuba diving, and I had a very nasty incident. Re-rehearse the whole thing here, but which under different circumstances, had I panicked, I'm sure it would have, that would have been the end of me, and we wouldn't be doing this interview. And the reason I didn't was nothing to do with scuba diving. It was entirely to do with the years and years and years of stuff that I'd done in the military in terms of building personal resilience, thinking through the problem, work the issue, and have the mental strength, I suppose, to in the moment be responding well to a situation that was pretty desperate in very difficult circumstances. And again, I think it's all those cumulative experiences you build up that will help you with that. And I think for anyone on kind of life's journey who's listening or watching, this, that is such an important thing to do. If you just constantly stay in the comfort zone and you don't actually turn around and stretch yourself, it is really hard to get those additional experiences that set you up well for that kind of success.
Yeah, no, I agree. And another thing I did was I was an underwater archaeologist for a bit, and that was an interesting experience as well. So that came out of university, but yeah, I've done a few things.
Okay, yeah,
But
you've done a lot of things. I mean, there's some really interesting stuff in here that we could talk for a lot longer about. That you really have put yourself in some interesting settings. I mean, and I guess it takes me to where I wanted to go anyway, because when you look back across all of that, with the experience you've got in business, the experience you've got in life, in the adventures you've done and things you've put yourself through. If you were talking to John, aged 18, about to embark into the world of work, what would you be saying to him?
go for it. Don't hold back. And actually, when I was 18, I was already stupid. So, you might want to go back a bit further. Although when I was 16, I was pretty idiot. I was a bit of an idiot then too. So I think that it's be you. I think be authentic, and that I found through all the trials and tribulations, and has kind of stood me in good stead. Um, be truthful, be honest, um, and and also listen. The loved ones around me, I take great solace from, and they not only put up with me but also encourage me, and that's really important as well. And it's something that I wouldn't, I don't think, no, in fact, I would say absolutely certainly I would not do anything different. Maybe about a couple of really stupid things. Um, yeah, the Baiju moment where I lost 2 hours of my life is probably not a great experience in China. But there are other things. Yes, you look back and you think, nah, probably not a great thing to have done. But actually, you learn from them, and you come out stronger. So I would say the same thing to me now, looking back a year, or rather than 10 years, or 20 years, or 30 years, or even longer. It's go for it, be authentic, be true to yourself, and keep going, because time is a great healer, and actually you will get through this.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, obviously, I do some of these questions I ask all the time, and it is very interesting how lots of people, and I think I would lump myself into this as well. It's about take a bit more risk, be comfortable with taking a bit more risk than perhaps you did when you were young. Is a feature that comes up a lot of the time because I think there is a sort of natural reservation lots of people have. I mean, you may not have felt that, and you may just have gone for it all the time, but I think an awful lot of people feel, they're held back by boundaries that are artificial kind of boundaries, and and pushing themselves and going for it is a great description. I think it's really 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 relevant. Highs and lows, John. I always talk about highs and lows. It sounds like you've got a few of probably each of those, but before we get into the actual high and the actual low, I mean, anything you would have done differently if you had your time again?
No, as you said, no. Um, Minor things, I think, uh, probably, but give you an analogy. Sorry, this summer, earlier this year in the summer, I went out to the Carneddau in the Gliders, which is in Snowdonia, and I was determined to climb a particular mountain, and I determined that I was going to do this. I was going to walk right over the Carneddau, which is a bit of a step, as you say. So I had a full pack on. You know what that feels like. So everything, and walked up a long way. I won't say which mountain. Got to the top, and there's a very, very, very narrow arete at the top of this, which I know about, but I thought, be fine. And it sort of rolls off the top of the hill and then gets a bit steep, goes super narrow, and then broadens out. And I got halfway down this with this pack on. I thought, I am going to die if I do this wrong. It's literally, I'm going to die. So leant back, took the pack off, had a bit of a look down, and thought, I can get down on my own, but I can't go down with the pack on. So put the pack back on, back up the mountain, all the way back down the mountain. And as I was going down, I thought, this is not going to beat me. This is just not going to beat me. So I then determined to go off piste over the side of the mountain, down a rocky crag that was probably even worse than the one I couldn't decided I wasn't going to go down the side of the mountain, round the back, and up the thing I couldn't come down, just to prove that I could do it. And that is really about slightly being bloody minded, of course, that is an element, but also about looking at a problem differently. And I've really I learned from just that one single experience of when I think about highs and lows, that the low was I had to admit myself I was too scared to go down. The high was actually going and doing it a different way. So I wasn't going to be beaten, and that is part of me. I don't like being beaten. Of course, I'll be beaten. You know, at the end of the day, you get beaten by stuff. But I'm going to give it my best shot not to get beaten. And a few weeks later, I went back with a lighter back after saying I went down it. So you know, and I think that is about not giving up on stuff. Don't give up on life. Don't give up on objectives. Don't give up. If you've done your best, you've really gone for it. You've gone to the edge of your envelope, and sometimes a little beyond. Then those you will get lows. Lows. I mean, I've fallen off stuff, and that's pretty annoying. But the highs come then from overcoming that low. And I think you don't get highs without lows. You can't, because you don't know what a high is unless you've had a low.
No, I totally agree with that. I think they are mutually inclusive, aren't they? And I mean, some of the time, the low point you describe is also intense pragmatism, right? I mean, it may feel a bit of a low point of disappointment at the time, but actually, it would have been a lot lower if you'd gone down it and fallen off.
Yeah.
It would have clearly been very low, not least for everyone that cares about you. I mean, what career high then? What's the career high point for? I mean, it can be, because obviously you've done so many other things as well. I mean, your personal life as well as professional, but your life high.
Because I've kept climbing, so I suppose where I am now. And I said before, it's like looking back down a mountain. You sometimes you keep going, and eventually the very annoying thing about British mountains, and you'll know this, is that they get another one after the first one, particularly in the lakes. You go up something like Skiddaw, and you get halfway up, and you think, oh, God, it's got to be the top. I mean, I remember this as a young man. Got to be the top. No, not the top. Next one, not the top either. Next one, not the top either. Next one, not the top either. 5 later, you're at the top. And that is a bit like life, isn't it? You keep on climbing. When you look back down, you think, oh, of course it was 5. And if I bothered to look at the map, that would have told me as well. If I'd been in no one, I didn't do that. But the whole thing about keep on climbing, keep on going. So I would say my high is now, and I've got more to climb. And at each point, I would say, oh, that's the high. So I could go back, and I've had really weird and wonderful experiences and fantastic experiences, and been places that I know, in China that many people have not been, and in the Himalayas that many people have not been, and in work. But I would say, I am currently at my current high.
Nice. And I think they're looking down the mountain analogy, because the other aspect of that I think is really true, and I can think about just the other day, where we were walking nowhere near as strenuous as Snowdonia or anywhere else. It was just in the South Downs, but going up what was a pretty steep hill, and we got to the top of the hill, and my wife was kind of going, "Blimey, that was hard work." And I said, "Yeah, but look where you started." And we look back down, and it's that I think is a really important thing to do, to actually recognize the journey and recognize the success along the way, whether it's an actual physical hill or whether it's just a metaphorical one in terms of how you've got to where you've come from, and give yourself the right pat on the back and give your team the right pat on the back as well. I think it's such an important feature out of that, because we don't do that often enough. I don't think we necessarily give ourselves the gratitude we deserve, and certainly we don't do it enough to people that work for us. It's one of my pet hates, but also pet phrases. As I say, the two words that we use too rarely in the English language are thank and you in the same sentence, because it just means so much. And particularly as a senior person talking to someone well down in the team, if you actually take the time to go and sit with them and have a chat with them, or pick the phone up to them and praise them for something they've done really well, that'll stay with them for a very long time. I mean, potentially forever. And it really matters. So it's a good example. Sadly, though, as we've alluded to, I mean, there's always a low point. What's the kind of big low point?
That's interesting. I was reflecting on this, and without going into kind of personal lows, I think in the business lows, because I had personal lows, losing people is a personal low. But from a business standpoint, I suppose I remember one very seminal moment when I'd been asked to speak in an event, and I died on stage, and that was a low you never ever forget, and you never ever want to repeat. But it was the making of me, really. So I go back to this thing about lows and highs, that you have to have some lows, and sometimes in work, not meeting budget. These are not the sort of people talk about lows in work, and I sort of think, yeah, well, it wasn't really a low. Nobody died. But when somebody dies in front of you, and I've had that happen, that's a low. I had a friend of mine drown in front of me,
Oh my goodness.
and that's a low. So it's all about relativity, isn't it? And of course, when loved ones die, parents or spouses and people die, friends, of course, those are tremendous lows. But I think it's really about how you deal with that low, and how would they have wanted you to respond, and they certainly wouldn't want you to respond. Of course, they'd hope that you would mourn their loss, but they would also, I know, hope for me and the loved ones I've lost would hope that I would carry on, and would learn and grow as a result of that loss and that mourning. Sad and awful as it is, that I think it's really important. And I think that goes back to something we were saying before about self-reflection and self kind of correction. That it's the old adage, life is a journey, not a destination. But I think it is really important. We're only here once. We need to make the best fist of it that we can. We need to be who we are. And I remember my father saying to me, nobody ever says on their deathbed, "I wish I'd spent more time in the office." So I do not spend as much time in the office as I might have done. Sorry, guys, I don't. But I do spend time. I'm out on the hill a lot. I'm outside a lot. I spend time with family a lot. And I think that's important because what you are now is also a bit like brands, to go kind of full circle to something else, which is a brand, and a personal brand is what people say of you when you're not in the room. So I always like to say, what are people going to say of me when I'm not here? Okay, not when I'm dead, but when I'm just not in the room. And that really is what is important to me. So I hope people feel I'm authentic, I'm genuine, I don't suffer fools. Yeah, okay. But I think it's really important. That authenticity, I think, is really important. I'm no different here than I am at work, than I am at home, than I am on the hill. Just the same.
Yeah, no, great. Again, terrific points, and I totally agree with you about no one says on their deathbed they wish they'd spend more time in the office, and I mean, never get killed rushing to work either is the other expression I've heard like that, which I think is true, because the the thing that's interesting from everything you've described, you bring it out really well actually, that it's that rounded human being, doing other stuff alongside what you do professionally that makes you actually better at what you do professionally. And I think some of the time people get lost in that, and it's really easy to do. You get totally focused, totally driven, totally overwhelmed by, particularly in today's connected world. You're never off, unless you're careful. You're going to find, even in the mountains, you're going to find a lot of places you've still got email if you're so inclined. And actually finding that time to properly switch off, properly distance yourself from that, get some headspace, think about what you're going to do. So important to do that. No, it's terrific. I always try and tap into the expertise of the guests that I've got, and you've touched already on the IOD and what the IOD is all about and what it's for. I guess one of the things is you also speak to a lot of business leaders, and I think we're living in some pretty challenging times, and cost of living, government turbulence, geopolitical challenge, all those kind of things that are there at the moment. Advice and thoughts and conversations that you are participating in, that you're providing advice to, and that you're hearing, just stuff that's out there. What would you offer at the minute?
So not all my job, but a large proportion of my job is spent engaging with the UK government. We're very blessed at the Institute in that we're one of what they call the B5. So we're the business representative organisations in the UK, so the chambers, the CBI that I'm sure people have heard about, the FSB, Federation of Small Business, does what it says on the tin, Make UK, representing the manufacturing businesses of the United Kingdom, and the Institute of Directors. Again, we are what we say on the tin. We are the Institute of Individuals Directors. So across, we're size, sector, location, gender, race agnostic, and we really work hard to represent, from an evidence-based perspective, the views of directors, and mainly in the middle market, Germans call it the Mittelstand, of the United Kingdom. And the thing that's on most people's minds right now, and we have the evidence, you can go online and look at the evidence online that we have, is the business confidence is at an all-time low. And I'm sure you'll find that when you're talking to business people. And that's challenging. We've got a budget coming up at the end of November, which is about the latest date that Rachel can actually do the budget with, and it actually still be autumn, to have an autumn budget. And we've got getting on for 30 billion black hole in the economy. And that could be very dispiriting. And of course, for many, it is dispiriting. The cost of living crisis, we have war in Eastern Europe, we have geopolitical turbulence, everything from Putin and Trump and Xi to Modi and others, some of the major leaders in the world who are, at the moment, very polarized, literally polarized in their thinking and approach to country economics and to geopolitics. So there is a lot of frustration around. We've seen essentially stagflation in the UK, really, by any other measure, for quite some time. There's a lack of investment in the UK. There's a lot of money around, believe it or not. There's a lot of money in business banks, bank accounts, but there's reticence to spend because the uncertainty as to what's going to happen in the budget and what's Labour going to do. So on the one end of the scale, we've got uncertainty and a reticence in business to invest. And then we've got the kind of very significant focus on input taxes from the government. So national insurance, living wage. We need to pay people the right wages, and no question about this. The other elements of the new act around employment, and all that does, and I'll come back to that in a moment. All that does is create greater pressure on business. Now, what we have said to Rachel is, and to the government, is not that we don't agree that people should be paid a living wage, and it's not that we don't agree that people should be paid a London living wage, or that they should have employment rights, or that we actually agree. The issue is that the current way that the government is operating is using a very blunt instrument to deal with what we would call the margins. So we would absolutely not want to see directors who break the law to get away with it. We expect to see people jailed. We expect people to see struck off. We expect the margins, the people who don't adhere to human rights, who don't pay the living wage, who don't, to be vilified and held to account on that. Equally, it's important that in order to generate growth in the UK, that you have some degree of stimulus, but the stimulus isn't necessarily cash. Stimulus is, and it's something we talked about earlier in terms of the way one should hopefully run a business, is about hope. And Obama wrote about the audacity of hope. The thing that a lot of people currently are seeking in the United Kingdom business community is some clarity. And I used this expression the other day, is give us a clue. I remember talking to previous chancellors, and exactly, Jeremy Hunter is a good example. Jeremy, just give us a clue. Business is pretty good. We're pretty robust. We can manage uncertainty. We've got some pretty good leaders. We know what we're doing, right? Just give us a clue. Give us a direction of travel, and that is what we're asking. And the direction of travel at the moment, unfortunately, is uncertain. And historically, Labour has tended to operate. People used to talk about the Brown-Blair years, very well managed, one could argue, but about being tax and spend. There's a bit of spend and hope at the moment, and that's difficult for business to get our heads around, because that's not the way we run a business. You don't spend money that you don't have. and that's quite difficult. So, of course, she needs to generate wealth. She needs to generate money into the coffers of the United Kingdom exchequer. And that's really where we're spending time trying to help her look at areas where she could do that. But that's about an investment strategy, not a spend strategy. So we take the approach from the Institute's perspective, because we advise boards. That's what we do. We try and improve the quality of boards. We really see ourselves advising the board of the UK, which happens to be called the Cabinet. And at the moment, we are spending time really saying, look, this is what it feels like in business. Confidence is ebbing, but there is an underpinning enthusiasm for brand Britain. There is an underpinning enthusiasm to invest with hope, providing you give us a clue. And we're just waiting for that clue from the budget.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting, isn't it? I think it's tough times politically. I mean, I can't really remember a time when in this country, or indeed when you look more widely around Europe and the world, you look at the sort of level of political turbulence, rise of populism, with the associated big political challenges that are out there, obviously, and geopolitical challenges in terms of, as you mentioned, war in Europe and those sorts of things. And obviously, I think that populism thing is a problem for the politicians. I think there is it's purely personal view, but I think there are some enormous challenges that the government of the UK at some point, whichever flavour of government it is going to have to really grapple with. The NHS, obviously, in terms of how you manage to afford it with a demographic that's going in the wrong direction, with the cost of healthcare that's going in the wrong direction the other way, and people living longer and needing more care. That's all a huge challenge. The welfare system, these are massive drains on the economy. That you can just see some enormous problems with them trying to fix that, without spending more money. Because I mean, I did a podcast again with Tom Tugendhat, was the MP for Tunbridge recently, and he was interested because he said there are only three ways of the government's basically manage the money. They raise taxes, they cut stuff in terms of what they're doing with different departments and reshaped up budgets, or they borrow more money. And when you're already borrowed up to the hilt, when you're already in a position where if you start taxing more, then the likelihood is you're going to get real pressure, and particularly with the Labour government, that's a really hard thing to do, I think. Now to tax, particularly if they're taxing people that are at the at the lower income levels, there's some enormous problems there. So yeah, I think you make some terrific points, and it is going to be fascinating to see how they come out of that, because my personal perspective is, both the main political parties in the UK are essentially running scared of reform, and where that potentially goes, and trying to find arguments and tactics that are going to fight reform. And that makes it the kind of focus on some of the things that business probably wants to focus on much harder, doesn't it? I mean, I don't know if you'd agree with me, but I don't want to go down too far down a political rabbit hole here. I try definitely not to make these political, but it just feels like a really tough time for politicians generally.
Yeah, I mean, we're apolitical, so I'm not going to comment on the politics of the matter. The thing really is about choices, and remember, there are. This is the beginning of the Parliament, not the end. It's the beginning of Parliament, and our advocacy really is about being brave, about making the hard decisions, because that's what we would do if we were advising a business. And then own those decisions. Nobody likes change. 50% of the people don't like change, and the other 50% don't like the change that you're making. So just make the change. And you then will have to, I'm afraid, and this is a Winston Churchill quote, you do not need to listen to every barking dog. And I think that's one of the things that I've been saying to a number of people in government. It's okay. We are probably going to fall out, but that's okay, because what we teach at the Institute is have a strategy. Now, we may not like your strategy, but have one and then execute on it. And execution is everything. So that is where our advocacy lies in terms of tax reform. That's where it lies in terms of the budget. That's where it lies in terms of give us a clue. Business is pretty good. I would argue, another hour, I'd argue very forcibly, I think, about the notion that business is an answer, not just the problem. And the working people of the United Kingdom are very resilient. And we've shown that through our history. We've shown that now, even in times of difficulty and turmoil. We're a very resilient bunch of individuals. We can deal with adversity. We can overcome adversity. And business is part of the solution, not the problem.
Yeah, terrific answer. Very much at the end, I always end with what's the most difficult question you've ever been asked, and you've already answered that. But there is one other one that I always ask at the back end, which is personal, back to you again, and it's what's the most memorable event of your career?
Oh, a career baguette. Memorable event of my life is definitely reaching the North Pole.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah, that would be pretty special to do that. That's an extraordinary achievement. I don't know. Is there a number of how many people have actually done that? Can't be that many.
I do know that at the time I was the oldest person in history to have got to geomagnetic North Pole. So I suppose that's not bad.
Yeah, not bad at all. Wow. Jon, fantastic. I knew it would be a great conversation. Thank you very, very much indeed. I really loved it. So many great insights and some lots of stuff to take away there. And I'm just in awe of some of the stuff you've achieved, to be honest. I think it's incredible. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
I really hope you've enjoyed this conversation with Jon. I thought it was terrific. It's such an interesting chap with so many fascinating facets to his experience and also just his kind of life and what he does, and really, really interesting. If you've enjoyed it, then please think about sharing it. Please like, if you don't already subscribe, please subscribe or follow or whatever it is on the platform you're listening or watching on. And please make sure that you're reposting, commenting, doing all the things that can help to get this out to a wider audience, because that really helps the podcast get bigger, to continue to get great guests and so on. So if you could help me a little bit, that would be great. If you've really valued it, then as I've always said for a lot of episodes now, please think about giving me some of that value back and going either through the support the show link in your podcast platform or in the YouTube notes that accompany this, or directly to patreon.com, www.patreon.com/leading4life. And you can find the opportunity there to sign up and be a supporter, a champion, or a patron of the show, and that would make a big difference to me, and will be enormously appreciated. It's as ever in these relatively straitened times, and I have to prioritize my time and what I do, and I would really love to continue to do this and make it more successful. So a little bit of help from you will make it much easier to do that. So thanks in advance. Thank you anyway for listening. Always appreciate having listeners. Please send me some feedback. That's always incredibly valuable. And I'll see you again very soon. All the very best. Bye-bye.